It's not just a crisis of trust, not just a crisis of hyper-partisanship that is destabilizing our democratic institutions. It's not just a crisis of division. It is a crisis of dehumanization. We are not seeing our fellow human beings, our fellow citizens correctly. We're not seeing them as they really are, beings with dignity, worthy of respect.
How do you restore public trust when incivility and polarization are at an all-time high? Rebuilding that trust is essential for effective governance, yet local leaders today face unprecedented challenges and demands. So in this interview, we will dig deep into what public trust really means for civility and local government leadership. We'll talk about what's behind the challenges in modern times and what you can do to begin restoring that community confidence. I'm Angelica Waddell with ICMA, and in this interview, I will be joined by Alexandra O. Hudson, who is the founder of Civic Renaissance and the author of the best-selling book, The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Society and Ourselves. Welcome, Alexandra. Thank you for being here.
A joy to be with you and so excited for Philadelphia mid-May. So please join us, guys, if you haven't already got your tickets. Can't wait to meet you in person.
That's right. Alexandra will be giving a keynote speech at the ICMA Local Government Reimagined Conference on Democracy and the Public Trust. This is coming to Philadelphia, May 13 through 15. So you can learn more about that conference at lgr.icma.org, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the very end. Let me tell you a little bit more about Alexandra. So her writing has appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, USA Today, Political, Newsweek, and a whole lot more. And she's a frequent commentator on several major news networks. She also created Storytelling and the Human Condition, a TV series produced by The Great Courses, Netflix for lifelong learners, exploring how stories shape human flourishing. Alexandra has also advised foreign governments from the Parliament of Canada to the UK House of Lords and addressed audiences at institutions such as Yale Law School, Stanford University, and Court of Appeals across the nation. She holds a master's degree in public policy from the London School of Economics, where she studied as a Rotary Scholar. And today, Alexandra draws on insights from her 100-city book tour and hundreds of conversations with leaders across the world to share what is working in civic life and the revival of civility. Has polarization impacted the work in your local government organization? We know that most city leaders say, yes, it is impacting government work. Let's talk about trust. Alexandra, in your opinion, why is the focus on public trust critical for local governments in 2026?
It's a very important question because we lack trust in our neighbors, in our public leaders, locally and federally. Like, trust is pretty low in institutions kind of across the board. And that's bad for democracy, bad for flourishing together. And I'll tell you what I'm seeing. For example, in my work with a community called Shelbyville, Indiana, a local church reached out to me and said, we want our church to be part of social healing in our community. We're very divided. So they brought me in. First, they read my book together, The Soul of Civility, Timeless Principles to Heal Society and Ourselves, which is about how to flourish across deep difference. As they started reading my book and learning ideas such as the difference between civility and politeness, I argue politeness is manners, etiquette, technique, whereas civility is internal, a disposition of the heart, a way of seeing others as our moral equals, worthy of respect just by virtue of our shared dignity. And so the church and community got a shared kind of intellectual foundation. What are we even aiming for when we're talking about civility and building trust amongst friends and neighbors? And then what happened about a month before I was set to actually speak at the church, a divisive issue exploded in Shelbyville over a data center. And all of a sudden, neighbors turned on neighbors. And at one town hall, the city council, the police had to be called. They were kind of barricaded on lockdown within City Hall because things had got so heated, so divided, even violent in Shelbyville over the proposed data center. And it wasn't even across the neat political lines of Republican or Democrat. It was just People who felt like this issue was being shoved down their throat, and all of a sudden this thing's going to be built in their backyard, and they didn't get a say in the matter. So when I came in to the church, the pews were full of people that had no connection to the church. They were just there because they were hungry for a better way to engage with their neighbors, with their public leaders. Because they said, I don't recognize my city anymore. And what we did that evening is, I shared with them, look, I'm not going to promise to solve your data center issue, right? If it's not the data center today, it may be something else next year. We are going to disagree about really important things. That's a feature of democracy, not a bug. What I did say, though, is that this book and my work, I'm offering you tools for how to flourish across difference, how to navigate difference without dehumanizing one another. That is the goal. How can we maintain a high view of this profound gift of being human in ourselves and others, which is what we need right now in this divided time, where it's not just a crisis of trust, not just a crisis of hyper-partisanship that is destabilizing our democratic institutions. It's not just a crisis of division. Again, we're going to be divided. We're going to differ. It is a crisis of dehumanization. We are not seeing our fellow human beings, our fellow citizens correctly. We're not seeing them as they really are, beings with dignity, worth, worthy of respect, just by virtue of our shared personhood. And then so after that talk that hosted by the church, we had a leaders roundtable the next day. We had members of 3 members of the city council, we had police chief, we had school board there, we had teachers, people across the cross sector of civic and public life in Shelbyville. And we said, okay, what now? We know the problem. The problem is palpable. The problem is everywhere, the division happening here. But what are we going to do about it? How are we going to embody this work starting right now? What are we going to do? And we put together a blueprint. They built this blueprint. And I said, look, I'm here today to help you build and sustain what it is that you want to see for your own community, right? I'm not uprooting and moving to Shelbyville. And what I love is that I left with such hope, as did the people in that room, that they had a greater sense that yes, things are bad, things are divided nationally, locally. It feels like that division is everywhere, but we have way more power to be a part of the solution than we realize. And that's what we learned that day. People reclaimed their civic agency, and they're still doing it. And I'll be back in Shelbyville to continue this work in the coming weeks and months. And that is this new season of my work, coming alongside local leaders and communities who want to see their communities not just grit their teeth and endure difference, but to thrive through it. It's not enough just to not be polarized, to not be divided. My work, my vision is to see communities be hubs of renewal and to help them dream up and build eras for their communities of multi-dimensional human flourishing. How do we build civic renaissances across the country and starting with ourselves, starting in our homes, starting in our communities? That is the heart of this work. When it comes to these big macro issues, like how to rebuild social trust, it starts with us. It starts with how we show up in our homes and in our communities. And that's what I'm excited for and hopeful for right now.
Well, I love that you bring that up. And I think it really speaks to that core human desire to have connection, to be heard. And it's not about the other opinions are the enemy or anything like that, but how can we move forward, as you said? How can we really hear what the needs are in the community? And then how can we leverage that into making, great decisions as local government leaders? And we also have a thoughtful comment here. Thank you so much, David. Public trust is increasingly shaped by how information is interpreted by AI systems, so technology coming into play, not just how it's originally communicated. When AI systems summarize across sources, they don't always preserve clear attribution, jurisdiction, or timing. That's where breakdowns happen. Accurate information can be presented in ways that dilute authority or introduce confusion, and it shifts the challenge from just communicating clearly to ensuring information can be interpreted correctly. It goes to say how important it is that we remain human
Oh, that is exactly my takeaway from, thank you, David, for your thoughtful comment. I think that is the most pressing question of our moment. What does it mean to be human, especially in the age of the machine? And I think the answer to that is doubling down on the things that are uniquely human about us. I mean, that's why what we're going to be doing in Philadelphia in May is so exciting, like gathering in person. That is radical, that is subversive in the age of, digitally mediated connection. Even right now, Angelica, I'd rather be in person with you. You invited me to a coffee when I come to San Antonio, and I'll take you up on that because that's radical, that's subversive, and uniquely human, gathering around a shared space. In fact, this is what we're doing this month. I'm inviting my people to a retreat, the Civic Renaissance retreat. It's a feast for mind, body, and spirit. And it's kind of counterintuitive, but sometimes the best thing to do to lead better in public life is to step away from public life, to retreat from it, and to rest, and to be nourished. If we're just doing the hard things and leading and giving from an empty well, we're not going to be our best self. So I'm inviting people into an oasis for this one weekend, and it's going to be a very small, intimate gathering of my Civic Renaissance ambassadors, these leaders across politics, geography, and vocation, who are taking my book, The Soul of Civility, off the page and into practice. And we are going to be with world-class leaders. Former Governor Mitch Daniels, a true statesman in the original sense, will be with Daryl Davis. He's an African-American jazz musician who has actively sought out and befriended members of hate groups. And to date, after 4 decades of this work, going to KKK and neo-Nazi bars and saying, hey, friend, tell me your story. He has converted 200 plus members of these hate groups just through friendship and basic kindness and curiosity. So it'll be a privilege to learn with and from him. He's a close personal friend, and we're very fortunate to have him. And we are going to, that weekend, dream about the world we want to build. The world, the era of multi-dimensional human flourishing. We're going to embody it, recreate it for one weekend, and then we're going to go build it back into our communities. And really the goal is to rest together in a uniquely embodied way, again, which I think is one of the most radical and subversive things we can do, is to double down and be human, in the ways that we can be. And that's the answer in the age of artificial intelligence and in the age of the machine that we're living in right now.
Because that's the thing that AI can't do, is be human, right?
It can't literally, take on flesh, right? Be a human being incarnate and have original thought and look you in the eye, and exactly, and all that micro, nonverbal communication, and the synergies. I love this line from Michael Oakeshott. He was an English philosopher. He said, "Conversation is an unrehearsed intellectual adventure." Only human beings can have those unrehearsed intellectual adventures. And even unfortunately now, so many of our conversations are defined and limited to what I call the tyranny of the efficient, the tyranny of the urgent, the things that are just like pressing, and we don't take and make the leisure time to sit back and reflect on big ideas and big questions that are kind of non-utilitarian, right? They're not driving the bottom line. They're not moving the ball forward, the bill, the ordinance, the issue, whatever the pressing thing is. And yet that leisure time, that stillness, that solitude is an essential part of being human. And I know you guys have that conversation on artificial intelligence coming up in Orlando. We were just talking about that prior to this. And so I hope that you're able to bring this part of the conversation, this question of not just how these AI tools can help us govern better, but actually how can they help us be better humans, and how do we make sure that we become and stay human, in the best sense of the word, in light of and in spite of these technologies sometimes.
And absolutely, that plays into trust. And we brought up technology, we talked about AI, but what are some of the other barriers that you see to public trust? And how much of an impact are you seeing that having on communities?
Yeah, there's of course artificial intelligence. There's also, a related technology of social media and our news cycle. I mean, I like to say this challenge of civility and trust in our institutions is not new. In fact, it's kind of a timeless human problem where as long as we've been around as a species, we've been trying to peacefully coexist and come together and thrive in cooperative engagements. And as long as we've been around as a species, it's been hard. It's been really, really hard. Like we are morally and biologically driven to meet our own needs before others, which is an ever-present threat to community and flourishing. And so I like to say that, this is a timeless problem, but there are novel technologies, novel aspects of modern life that are unique challenges to our moment. And we talked about social media and like, I think, and, smartphones, a new related technology. The ubiquity of our news cycle and our connectedness is kind of overwhelming to our like mammalian brains. And we're not really caught up. Our norms and our habits haven't really caught up to like what is healthy. And so we're kind of just connected all the time. We are consumed and consuming news, consumed by and consuming news all the time, inundated with these things that don't necessarily affect our lives and over which we have no control. And the result is that we are chronically burnt out, utterly exhausted, and feeling really disempowered and also angry and fearful. And these are emotions that aren't conducive to our flourishing. And that's why I come down over and over and over again to my theory of social change is we can't change others, but we can change ourselves. And I'll tell you a story that reflects that. Part of my story, I wrote my book because I had a really toxic experience in federal government, which is one reason why I love working with local governments so much and local leaders so much. I just like fled DC and I was like, there's no hope here. I came home from work one day and said to my husband, I'm done with DC. I'm done with the swamp. Let's move to Indiana. And my husband's from Indiana originally. So he said to me, okay, sounds good. We'll move to Indiana. No takebacks. And a few months later, we moved to Indiana. And one of my first days, few months of church, for first few months living here, I went to a church. And after church, a woman came up to me and said, hi, I'm Joanna. Would you like to porch with us sometime? And I never heard the word porch used as a verb before, but I was curious and I didn't have many friends in town. And so that invitation felt very welcome. So we went to her home that afternoon and I realized something subversive and radical and beautiful happening on Joanna's porch that day. She had curated people across politics, across vocation, across geography, not to be, static, stereotypical, representations of their, class or political persuasion, but to be just human beings together. It was an oasis from the division. And it was a place to be seen and known and loved in the fullness of who we were as human beings, not by virtue of our political beliefs. And it was her quiet way, but powerful way of saying, I can't control others. I can't control the tragedy around the world. I can't control what happens at City Hall. I can control myself. And I'm going to double down and make my community better and stronger and more beautiful from right where I am. And every single one of us can too. I've seen it. I've seen people with and without a front porch doing it. I love the porch as like a metaphor of this disposition of civility, of focusing, relocating our locus of control within us and not externalizing and blaming, which is chronically disempowering, but saying, I have ownership. And I have way more over my life, over my community, and I have way more power to even either be a part of the problem or the solution than we realize. And that will be my message in May. Like, what is our role in fostering multidimensional human flourishing? It starts with how we show up day in, day out with our friends, with our neighbors, with our family. And not just in our professional, when we wear professional hats as city leaders.
I love the idea of using the porch as a verb, because that's an invitation for
Yes.
you to engage in reaching out to people and say, would you like to join the porch? Come porch with us.
Yes.
And that's step number one, is inviting in that participation. And then on top of that, I loved how you described the idea of it starts with the internal. It starts with here rather than
External.
attacking.
Exactly.
First, we invite We work on the internal before we make the real difference. Now, let me ask you this, because this will maybe help frame it a little easier. But what do you mean by building a civic renaissance? What does that mean?
Thank you for asking. So I'm really inspired, and I'm a student of history, and I'm inspired by all the insights and lessons when we look back in history and we see eras of multidimensional human flourishing. When we see these eras where there was just this real proliferation of human ingenuity and unlocking of human potential in really beautiful ways. One example is Periclean Athens. Pericles was the leader of Athens. And in this like 70-year period in ancient Greece, we had architecture, like the Parthenon was built. We had Euripides and other playwrights. We had Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, all in that period. Their Lyceum and the Academy, and we just had, citizens, average citizens who had ample time to self-cultivate. The secret ingredient to this, and I love looking at each of these eras, whether it's the, Florentine Renaissance, the Bengali Renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance. Each of them had their own kind of secret ingredients, but one of them was a fundamentally high view of what it meant to be human. First of it takes kind of relative peace and prosperity, and then a high view of humanity and human potential, and then also time to self-cultivate, time in solitude and stillness to self-cultivate. And so the ancient Greeks called this leisure time skole. What does that sound like? Skole. What is that? Does that remind you of a modern word, Angelica, that you can think of?
Scholar, perhaps?
Scholar and school. This is the
In
etymological
school.
root of our word for school, which is kind of, ironic and funny to me because like leisure is the last thing you think of with modern school. Our poor kids are like, and high school students, college students, we're micromanaged. Every moment is accounted for. They're up at 7, they're in school by 8, they're out until 3, and then extracurriculars. And it's like, we need time and stillness and solitude to self-cultivate and become fully human. And so building a civic renaissance is taking the wisdom of the past, wisdom from ancient Greece, ancient Athens, from other parts of the world, from the Great Conversation. The Great Conversation is this iterative dialogue across time and place that reflected on big questions. What does it mean to be human? What is the best way to live? And then applying that wisdom to our modern life. And my hope is to unlock an era of human potential and a multidimensional human flourishing, starting with the leaders that I work with, starting with, the people that we're inviting into this conversation that we porch with in Philadelphia. I hope you get to porch with us there, Angelica. I'm excited to meet you at some point and to meet many of you. I hope to meet you guys in person, many of you listening to this.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of Philadelphia, this is going to be a celebration as well as an opportunity to connect with other local government, with your peers, with thought leaders in the field, but it's also the 250th anniversary of the United States democracy. So we are really looking forward to having Alexandra as the keynote speaker in Philadelphia this May. And let me tell you just a little bit more about what we're talking about, because as polarization rises, ethical leadership matters more than ever, and public trust matters. So you can join your peers for networking. We've got education sessions, we've got workshops, all of this celebrating the nation's 250th anniversary. You'll gain practical strategies and tools to lead high-stakes meetings, manage scrutiny, and rebuild community confidence. And again, you can learn more about that at lgr.icma.org. And why are you particularly looking forward to that event, and why did you decide to speak at it?
I think that the future of our country resides with local leaders, the people who inhabit our institutions and who choose to reclaim our civic power. I can't control others, but I can control myself, and I'm going to serve and double down on making my community the best it can be. So that's why I'm excited. I'm honored to be with you guys in Philadelphia. Thank you for your public service. It's a hard time to be a public leader, so thank you for your service. I look forward to thanking many of you in person and can't wait to be with you in just a few weeks.
Wonderful. Well, we appreciate it. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we head out for the day.
I invite many of you, if you'll be in Philadelphia, and even if you won't, to read my book, The Soul of Civility. And I wrote it to be a handbook for you to lead and help your community flourish across difference. So I hope that that is an encouragement and a service to you. And then bring your copy, and I'd love to sign it for you at the event.
I need to get my copy so you can sign one for me.
Please do. I'd love to.
Definitely one to check out. And hopefully we'll see y'all over in Philadelphia very soon. Thank you so much again, Alexandra, for being here.
A joy, a total pleasure and joy. Thank you all. Have a great day.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.